Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another review. Now this is the second time I've recorded this review because I forgot to add something, and also I was a little out of it last night when I recorded it, so said just give it another shot. Anyway, the movie I'm reviewing is one I saw a couple nights ago. I had fun in the theater. The audience was really into it, actually saying stuff along with the movie, but not loud enough that the whole audience would hear it, like the Avengers, but Midnight Showing's a different standard, but anyway, the movie, of course, is Olympus Has Fallen, the film directed by Antoine Fuqua, starring Gerard Butler, Aaron Eckhart, Morgan Freeman, Angela Bassett, Robert Forster, Rick Yoon, and Dylan McDermott, among others. Now, I'm happy to report that this film actually is getting praise. It has a 7.2 on IMDb, which I think it deserves. It has a 76% with the audience on Rotten Tomatoes. Sadly, the critics is lower with 50%, but, for a film like this, it's kind of expected from the critics, and a couple of the critics I expected to hated it, but I don't care, because I have to agree with the first part of the consensus. It's far from original, but Olympus Has Fallen benefits from Antoine Fuqua's tense direction and a strong performance from Gerard Butler. You have to say that is true. Fuqua's direction is excellent, and Gerard Butler, I have to say, is probably the heart performance of this movie. Now, of course, there's the one phrase everyone's been saying, based on the trailer and what they've known about the plot, actually does fit this movie. Die Hard in the White House. Because that's basically what this movie is. You take the basic premise of Die Hard, one man fighting off a group of terrorists inside of a building while trying to rescue someone. Instead of, that's basically the plot of the movie. But instead of, a skyscraper where, different floors and all that, it's the White House. So you also have that added political thing, because there's a little political tension in Die Hard, but not so much, especially when we find out what the twist at the end is involving the terrorists. But here it is fully political, which I will address the political climate of that the film takes stuff from on. But I will say, after watching this film, I really want to see more films that kind of take the basic premise of Die Hard, one man against other people inside a building or some other structure, and do more with that, because it's just such an interesting thing if you can do it right. Because I would say this film succeeded in everything. There's only one problem I have with the movie, and I'm going to get to that right now, and that is some of the dialogue could have been better. Like, a lot of the dialogue, I'm not talking about dialogue like open the gates of hell, stuff like that. There's bits of dialogue where it's like, okay, that could have used from another brief polishing up, but it didn't bother me, especially from what I hear that this is the first time these two guys have ever written a movie together. Creighton Rothenberger, yes, that's his actual name. Rothenberger. The H looked like another T, Rothenberger. And Katrin Benedict. It's a K, so I'm guessing that's his Benedict. They did a good job for their first screenplay together, so I have to say some of that dialogue is excusable. For those of you who've seen the movie, you probably know what I'm talking about, and those of you who haven't, you will see, but that's my only nitpick. As I mentioned, Fuqua's direction is good. It actually wants to make me check out some of his other movies, because I know before this he did Brooklyn's Finest, he did that movie Shooter, the '04 King Arthur movie, which you guys know I'm a fan of movies like that, so I've actually been meaning to check it out. Tears of the Sun. Before that he did Training Day. His first movie was The Replacement Killers, and of course Bait. So I've been meaning, this makes me want to check out his direction, and I hope he definitely gets more work after this. Now, the score was done by a guy named Trevor Morris, which I'm going to check real quick to see what's done, because the score would fit the atmosphere and climate of the movie. He's best known for creating soundtracks for TV shows The Tudors, The Pillars of the Earth, and The Borgias. Let's see. Is this his first movie soundtrack? Yeah, this is his first movie soundtrack, apparently. He has worked on a number of video games too, like Army of Two, and he also worked on the film The Hills of Ice 2. And he's worked with film composers like James Newton Howard and Hans Zimmer, so I can see a little bit of that influence in his score a little bit. But it's a score that I think and I actually did enjoy this score a lot.
Probably have to listen to see if I can do it by itself, like certain other scores, but this is a serviceable score, I'd say. Now to get into the plot of the movie. The plot of the movie, as I probably can guess, is probably similar to Die Hard, with one main difference between
how Die Hard is set up and how this movie's set up. Whereas Die Hard, the backstory between the main characters is only mentioned in exposition, this time we actually see it. And what happens is that our main character is Matt Banning. He is a former U.S. Army Ranger who is now a Secret Service agent, and he's assigned to presidential detail. And he has a friendly relationship with the president, whose name is Ben Asher. He's Aaron Eckhart's character. The First Lady, Margaret, Ashley Judd in a cameo, and their son Connor. And that's what the first scene kind of shows. But one night, on a drive from Camp David, it's snowing and everything. There's an accident on the bridge. The presidential limo gets hit and all that. And I'm not going to spoil the specifics of it, but Margaret dies. Now, the president doesn't blame Banning, but seeing him is going to be too painful, so he has him reassigned to the Treasury Department, which is still within eyeshot of the White House. You can read some stuff into that, but it's just a coincidence, I think. Now, it goes 18 months later. You know, Banning wants to get back into the Secret Service, but Brody already tell why he's not going to be allowed to. Now, that same day, the president is going to be meeting with a prime minister from South Korea, because they're talking about North Koreans probably attempting to try to go over the demilitarized zone, which, for those of you who don't know what the demilitarized zone, it is the area along the border of North and South Korea. If I remember correctly, it's 20 miles on each side, where basically no military people usually go, except for probably patrols. And if I remember correctly, there's also a lot of landmines there. So you could probably guess, so to be able to cross, you got to get past all that. And it was set up, you know, to prevent the South from invading the North again, the North from invading the South again. And that's part of the political climate that I will address later on after I get through the plot, but just letting you guys know for those of you who don't know. Now, while the Prime Minister and the President are having a meeting, a plane attacks. You know, that's the thing that causes the Washington Monument to collapse, which is a good CGI effect. Would have preferred a model, but it was actually a very good effect, I will say. If there was more CGI in films like this, I wouldn't really mind it as much as I usually do when I see CGI that looks half-ass or like video game stuff. You guys know what I'm talking about. Anyway, eventually more terrorists show up, as we find out later, from North Korea, but not really affiliated with the government. They're like an independent thing. And of course, a couple of them are actually part of the detail that came with the Prime Minister. And of course, they take over the White House, as one of the agents puts in before he dies. Olympus has fallen, Olympus has fallen. Olympus being code word for the White House. Now we find out that the mastermind is a man named Kang Yeon-sak, played by Rick Yoon, who is an ex-North Korean terrorist who is motivated by reunifying Korea, because his whole motivation is that he hates the U.S. government for interfering in a civil war. And if you guys don't know your history, that civil war he's talking about is, of course, the Korean War, because North Korea is civil war.
And if you think about it, in a strange way, part of the Vietnam War was also a civil war, but unlike North Korea, it actually succeeded, and we got a unified Vietnam. And of course, Kang blames the United States government for the shape North Korea is in today. You know, the poverty and everything, which I can understand where he's coming from, because America does have a thing of policing the world and all that. Which, of course, if George Washington looked at what we did around the world, this would probably be his reaction. If you guys wondering why I say that, Washington had two important pieces of advice: stay away from political parties, stay out of foreign affairs. And if you can think about it, for the most part, we did stay out of foreign affairs. It was only until like the last 100 years that we started getting heavily involved. The first two world wars we did, but we stayed out of it until it was basically, hey, we got to get involved. First World War, oh no, we're going to lose the money we gave them. What are we going to do? Hey, they sank the Lusitania, you bloody Germans, we're going to kick your ass. World War II. Oh, let's see, we might lose more money. What are we going to do? Oh, Japan, you can't have that oil. What, they bombed Hawaii? Gotta go kick some ass. That's basically it. After that is when we started doing a bunch of the policing stuff like we did. Of course, in between World War I and II, we had a depression, so even if we wanted to, we couldn't really do anything there. That's part of the reason I think now we probably need to shrink how far around the world we are with it, but that's just me. Might actually help. But anyway, back to my point about Kang. I can see where he's coming from with that, but he's leaving off one main point about the reason North Korea is in the shape it is in. They have a communist dictatorship.
I will say dictatorship because in a true communist government, no one is supposed to be a dictator. Like, you're supposed, if I remember correctly, you're supposed to have like a provincial government, but they keep going, or you're not supposed to have anyone with authority at all. Or it's going to be kind of like how the Native American societies are. You just put one guy to be in charge, but if he's not doing a good job, you kick him the heck out of the office. But with North Korea, it kind of models itself off of China and, of course, Russia. You guys all know Stalin. But they go a little bit more extreme with it, because Russia did okay for a few decades. And then, of course, we all know it eventually collapsed when the Soviet Union fell apart and it went into all those other countries. China, it has been doing okay, even more so, since it actually allowed some capitalist stuff into it. Because, look at it, they basically own us. Look how many jobs we ship over there, which, with how we are now, probably was a stupid idea, but I'm not going to really get into that argument in this video. But North Korea, they are hardcore communists. I think they're the only one that really seems to be hardcore communists, because there's only 4 communist countries left in the world. China, which was already addressed. Vietnam, which you don't really hear much about Vietnam on the news and all that, so I'm guessing... If you guys know how Vietnam's doing, let me know, because as far as I know, they're doing alright, but I could be wrong. And then, of course, Cuba, we all know about that. On the side note, I think we need to undo that embargo we have on them and try to reestablish a political exchange with them, but that's just me. But North Korea, they're the most hardcore of the ones, because look at how bad they are. I mean, the only parts that they really like showing people are the good areas. They never like to show the poverty area, because it's their own fault. Because of how hardcore communist they are. It's the point... One of my history teachers in high school put it this way. North Korea is to the point now that the only way that eventually they're going to have only one of 2 options. 1, restart the Korean War, because technically speaking it never ended, it's just at an armistice, which is a ceasefire. Because World War I had an armistice, but eventually there was, which I guess you could also argue that World War I and World War II are the same war, but I believe World War I also had a peace treaty. Yeah, it did. Whereas... which is the Korean War, it only had like a ceasefire and then like separating the boundary. I don't think it had an official peace treaty, but they either have to restart the Korean War and try to invade South Korea, or wave the white flag and basically tell South Korea, come on, well, we want to reunite, just come here and do this. Which I have a feeling, based on recent events, is probably going to be the invading one more than the other one, but we'll just see what happens, especially now that Kim Jong-il is dead. But now, I know some people on Rotten Tomatoes, that I read a little bit last night, are getting a little offended by how the North Koreans are portrayed in this movie. You know, just like some people got uppity about the Iranians in Argo. But you guys already know my thoughts on that. And they're like, basically one of them was trying to say, yeah, they're portraying them just like they have portrayed terrorists in past movies and how they portrayed Native Americans in the old westerns. I'm like, what? Really? You're thinking that? Really? I disagree with that. Because, first of all, if you think about the North Koreans, the way they act in real life is not really much of a stretch to say they would do this. And secondly, the villains in this movie are not affiliated with North Korea. The reason I say that is, even though they state in dialogue that North Korea is denying their involvement in it, it could have just been plausible deniability, you know, a little side thing that maybe he was working with the North Korean government, but they had to deny it, he had to deny it, and he had to make it seem like he was independent, but that's just a thought thing. Based on what's shown in the film, most likely he was an independent one. Now, the acting in the movie, Butler, like I said before, the heart and soul of the movie, excellent performance. You really feel for the guy after the accident that happened. You want to see him succeed throughout the movie, and it kind of is a little redemption story, as they point out in the dialogue. And in a way, if you think about it, he does kind of redeem himself for what happened, even though they don't blame him for the death, because he was doing his job. But you could tell that he blames himself a little bit. And he redeems himself by saving him. Aaron Eckhart, he does a great job as a president, even though a majority of the film he's sitting in a bunker like this. But how the look on his face and his vocal inflection and some of his body movements, all that kind of make up for that. And also the fact that he does give us a good presidential speech at the end of the movie also makes up for it. I have to say, him and Bill Pullman are my favorite movie presidents because of their speeches and all that. You guys all know what I'm talking about with Pullman. Morgan Freeman as the Speaker of the House, excellent job. You know, he has the right voice for a character like this, especially since he does give a couple speeches during the middle of the movie, one of which we hear partially in the trailers. And you really do buy him as an authority figure, like when he tells the general to shut up, which everyone in the theater is like, yeah, tell him, Freeman. Let's see. Angela Bassett is the head of the Secret Service. Does a good job for the few scenes he's in. Robert Forster plays the general that Freeman tells to shut up, which he does a good job as well. Ashley Judd, for the brief part she's in the film, good job. Melissa Leo plays the Secretary of Defense, Ruth, which she does a good job as well. Dylan McDermott as our secondary antagonist. I'm not going to spoil the thing about his character, but he also did a good job. I was kind of surprised about him a little bit, though. Radha Mitchell plays Gerard Butler's wife, which she's only in a few scenes, but you could definitely see a little bit of chemistry between them. But you could tell it's not fully there, and I mostly saw that because of Butler's mental issues with dealing with what happened 18 months before. And also, the first scene we see him together with, it kind of reminded me of a scene in Total Recall. You know, that scene where Arnold's watching the news, you know, drinking the shake, and then he tells his wife he wants to go to Mars. Kind of reminded me a little bit of that scene, just the way it's set up and everything. I'm like, what is this, Total Fallen or something? If they did that as an intentional homage, that's actually pretty cool, but maybe it's just me noticing it. Rick Yoon is our villain, excellent performance. I'd actually like to see this guy get more work as a villain. I thought he looked familiar, and I looked it up last night. He played one of the characters in Man with the Iron Fist. That's the one I most recently recognized him from. He was in other movies too, but I'd say he did a good job. I'd like to see him as, like I said, as more. The rest of the actors like Sean O'Brien, Lance Broadway, Tori Kittles, they did good jobs. And what else is there to say about the movie? I've already talked about the visual effects. The action sequences I thought were shot pretty well. I didn't notice any shaky cam. It looked more like a panning, even more so than Bullet to the Head. Because that one looked like it was the guy, the cinematographer, was trying to pan, but couldn't keep his hand still at times. Whereas this one, it actually felt more natural. Maybe that's just me noticing it. Now, it's hard for me to say if I like this or The Last Stand more, because this one, it's a film that you could tell was made for Butler to go in. Whereas Last Stand, you could tell it wasn't written with Arnold in mind originally. But still, it's good to see the first half of that movie. Arnold flex his acting muscle. But probably something I'm going to have to decide when I do my top 10 list. Because I can tell you, this film's probably going to be on that list. Now, the movie does have a kind of a message thing at the end. But it's not really forced on you all that much. Or maybe it's because we're used to, maybe it's just me being used to this type of message. Because we hear it a lot in, you know, presidential speeches and everything. So I think it's kind of fitting that the message he's giving in a presidential speech. It's basically that we will overcome any obstacle and that we will rebuild greater than before. That's basically the message of the film at the end that the president gives. Didn't bother me. And kind of fit with what happens in the movie. You didn't really need it. You could have just ended it, you know, like kind of similar to how Die Hard ends, you know. All the main characters being reunited with their loved ones and then, you know, kind of ending there. But I think the presidential speech kind of adds a little bit more to it. And it gives Eckhart one last scene to do. And also we get to see just how much Butler redeemed himself with it. I'm not going to spoil what it is, but I thought it was fitting. And of course we get that epic score that plays in the background as the credits begin, which I have to say was a very great way to end the movie. Anyway, my rating for Olympus Has Fallen is 4.5 out of 5 stars. If you haven't seen the movie, I say get your butt to the theater and go see it.